welcome to the first episode of The Writer versus the Audience. Today's episode is titled Surviving the Modern Horror Market. Now you might be asking me, why is this podcast named The Writer versus the Audience? Because naturally you would think that the audience and the writer are both allies. The writer is producing what the reader wants, while the reader is the individual who helps support the writer and their vision by picking up their works and potentially becoming a lifelong fan. But I believe that these two parties, especially over the last 2 decades or so, have actually become enemies. And why is that? Because in between them is this gigantic rift that has been created. And it's a rift that is filled with mistrust. There are so many bridges that are aiming to connect these two opposing shores, basically, or sides. Yet, not every bridge that the reader steps on is solid. Sometimes they may get halfway across and it collapses underneath their feet. Other times they may get all of the way across. But then once they are there, they realize that the signs that led them to this other side was actually a side that they didn't want to arrive at. So they're in the wrong location. But you can probably see where I'm going with this. What is leading all of these people here? What is creating a lot of this mistrust? It's marketing. It's hollow marketing. Before I go too deep into this rabbit hole, I'll be coming back to this point later. I want to start off with my very first point, which is most readers are actually trained skeptics. And let's be honest, there is plenty of research out there that supports people who read more have higher cognitive abilities than those who don't. And in one area in particular, I know that reading increases analytical thinking, and so you can be more systematic. You can see through BS a little bit better. You're not as susceptible to either scams or, manipulative thinking. But there was another one too that, the theory of mind. When people read fiction, they actually have a boost in their ability to have this theory of mind, or it boosts their strength in theory of mind. So you can basically read between the lines. You can go behind the scenes without being behind the scenes and have a better understanding of what's being pushed at you or what's being sold to you. The other thing that I think makes readers natural skeptics is the commitment it takes to read a book. Unlike watching a film or watching a TV show, if you're a reader, you are going to be sitting with a book for quite some time. Now, of course, every reader has their different speed. For the most part, reading a book is going to take more time than it would to watch a movie. And because of that, they're naturally more skeptical. Am I ready to commit to this thing? Because I'm not just going to be wasting 30 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes. I could be wasting potentially weeks if this thing is not to my liking, or if it does not deliver on what it is offering. And one of the last things under this point is that readers on average are not in your typical modern sales funnels, or in the areas where those sales funnels are being pushed heavily. Like social media is a big example. Yes, I have no doubt they're on social media, but they may not be spending as much time or money or even believing what influencers are pushing on them, saying. So when you combine all of these things together, you get a natural skeptic who is already a high entry barrier. The second point that I want to make is that readers now are also very scattered, meaning where they go to source their interest and to find out about new books is a lot more scattered than what it used to be. In the past, like it or not, there were gatekeepers for books and which books were sold and who ended up being on the shelf. And because of this, you ended up having a more centralized market for books. Meaning, if you were into pulpy horror books, you could find zebra books and you would know exactly the type of book you're getting into. It's not some deep philosophical book. It is going to be pulpy, fun, action, horror, and you know what you're getting into. But you could find a zebra book in a bookstore in that section. If you were into romance novels, the same thing applies. You would know from the cover, you would see it, and it's there in the store. It has been vetted by somebody who is an editor at a romance publishing company. And because of this, you knew that it was going to be maybe decent quality, if not better than that. However, now in the modern day market, you can go to several different places to source your books. There's not just a bookstore and you find your section anymore. Even in the past, you could go to grocery stores and you would be able to find books on the shelf. And if it piqued your interest, pick it up. It was a paperback. You could get some for $3, really cheap. Now you can go to Amazon and it is just filled with books, more than anybody could ever read in a lifetime. And because of this, it's an ocean of choices, and a lot of people end up drowning in that. So what was the modern or the more online solution to this? It was to create places like Goodreads where people could rate books and you could find out about other new books potentially. There's another app called Fable. There were book reviews on Amazon if you go and look at a book. Yet, it creates a scattered audience. There is just too much going on. There are too many wise individuals who know how to manipulate reviews. There are publishing companies now that know how to bolster their own reviews for books. They know how to make it seem like a book is something that somebody like you, perhaps, would really love and enjoy, even if it isn't of the best quality. So I think you could probably see very clearly now why it's writer versus the audience and how the stakes are so much higher. Just with these last 2 points, you have a highly discerning crowd of readers, and at the same time, you also have so many fake things out there, so many fake marketing ploys, and books that are often said to be the next greatest horror book. Yet, you go and read it and you think this is mid at best. So what is all this hype about? And I've had this happen several times. There was one book, and I liked the book. Don't get me wrong, it was by Blake Crouch. And I'm not knocking the guy because let it be clear that I liked the book. It was called Dark Matter. And everybody was telling me how it is just so deep, it's so heavy, it's going to be one of the greatest books you've ever read. It's so mind-twisting and mind-boggling. And I'm not knocking the book. I felt that it was a good book, and by people telling me, I mean on Goodreads and seeing all of these other reviews that were coming up, I actually got a hold of the book, and being a big science fiction reader, I read it and I thought, this isn't mind-blowing in my eyes. If it had been told or it had been marketed to me as a fun book, a fun multi-reality book where somebody's traveling between different parallel universes, I would have thought, yes, this is a good book. It's fun to read. It's easy to read. This guy is obviously a good writer. However, when it is just over the top with the marketing, I left giving it a 3-star. But in retrospect, I gave it a 4.5 because it turned out to be a book that I really liked. But as somebody who had already read a lot of books that were dealing with similar concepts, like, what's the one? Lisa Tuttle, Lost Futures, that's the name of it. That is a book that already did this concept back in the 90s. And I felt like she did it in a very unique way too, and she brought up a point, and I won't spoil it for you because if you're a reader, I would suggest you read that book. And there's a point at the end of the book where things really start to take off, and she has such a unique concept in there that I haven't actually seen it done before in any other book. But ambiguous, non-spoiler recommendations aside, it just goes to show that it makes it even harder to regain that trust of the audience. Like in my case personally, I just felt a little bit burnt. And I know that this is a weird thing to say, but as a reader, you do spend quite a lot of time with a book. And you want to experience something new and unique. And if you're not going to experience something unique, you need to be told that it is just going to be a fun read or an enjoyable read. Something along those lines. Because also, I read plenty of pulpy horror books, especially ones from the 80s. Why? Because they are unabashed in what they are. And they're unabashed in what they are selling. They do not come here claiming that this is going to be the most revolutionary horror book you have ever read about killer slugs. No, the book is basically saying, hey, this is not parroting, but it is very similar to James Herbert's Rats, okay? You know what you're getting into. A lot of seemingly harmless animals all of a sudden come together, or creatures come together and become very deadly and destructive. And that's what I want to read. That's what I'm happy to read because it's simply fun. Okay, but before I get too lost on this point, let me go on to point 3, which is basically this. A lot of publishers and a lot of just independent sellers and self-published individuals are dealing with an oversaturated market now because we don't have a lot of gatekeepers. Anybody and everybody can make their own book, put it up on Amazon, and let it be that. And I'm not here to say that this is all terrible or bad or anything like that, because if you look at the top of this video, many of those books up there have been self-published by me or published by an independent publisher. But what this creates is a desperation to stand out in an oversaturated market. There are just so many books out there and so many things that, again, readers are just overwhelmed. And being able to distinguish which ones genuinely will give you that euphoric feeling or that dopamine hit that you're going for, it's hard to know. It's very difficult to know. So that's how our audience becomes our enemy in a way, because we are going up against these people that are claiming, oh, this is the best book in the world, or somebody who has an incredible marketing budget, a very high one, and they can go and spread out lots of money across different social media influencers or different advertisements here and there. And over time, you're just seeing it in several different places, and you're hearing from so many people who seemingly are giving an organic review. And in that way, you're like, oh, then this must be a good book. It must be the best book in this genre that they're talking about. You pick it up and you find out, oh, guess what? It's not. And I think that's what makes it a bit difficult. And along with there being so many sites where people put their writings up for free, I've heard of Wattpad and several others that are quite similar. even fan fictions and all of these things, but nobody is really bringing it in a centralized way to an audience. There's not this vetted and verified way of discovering, hey, is this a good book? Because even if you go with a publisher now, even if you pick up a book that is done by a big publisher, you are not guaranteed to have that good quality experience, because publishers also see it as, if I sell this book that is written by this person who has 100,000 followers on their Instagram or their TikTok account, then I'm more likely to sell at least 20 to 40,000 of these books. Okay, that's the rationale. And it does not equate at all to the quality of work. It could be one of the worst sort of pieces of, fiction ever. But because this individual has some sort of following, because they've made it on social media or wherever, they then are given the keys to this gate. And the publisher sends it out and says, oh, this person, this is their book. So I find that, the 2 points that I've made are a bit combined, and it just makes it even more tricky for readers, for writers, to really come and meet in this middle ground. A very, very neutral middle ground. And this brings me to my 4th point, and that general readership across the board has gone down drastically. Maybe there's not exactly a market anymore for reading. There's not this huge market for books that are just fun, enjoyable, that can be even campy horror books. That may not be a thing anymore. Why? Because you have so many competing things that are vying for individuals' attention. You have social media. You have Netflix and other streaming platforms that are easy to access. Because I know when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, if you wanted to rent a movie, you know what you had to do. You had to go to Blockbusters, Hollywood Video, or some other video rental chain. And that was $5, give or take, per video. And it lasted you a week. Okay? If not, you were going to watch cable TV. But beyond that, you didn't have nearly as much control over your content. And piracy wasn't really a thing until later in the 2000s. So example, if you look at my book up here, Wit and Doom, Where Greed is Thicker Than Asbestos, to me this book is written as a comedy horror. And it is written as a homage, in my heart, to a lot of the 80s horror novels, the ones that I really love and found to just be a delight to read. It's not something that is going to change your life. But one thing that I can promise with it is that it has fun moments. It is, in my mind, an enjoyable read. It is something that's light. It's not super heavy. I mean, if you are looking for something super heavy, though, you can see up there at the Dream Factory, that one's a very different tone and a very different feel. If you can imagine Cormac McCarthy writing some science fiction, which he did with The Road, but more along the lines of in a society where dreams are no longer allowed to the general population. And these two books are very different, but they also struggle to find an audience because one, yes, is quite deep. There are some things done in it that I don't believe have been done in any other book, and it has a unique idea at the end. However, gaining somebody's attention and going on a long journey like this, and it's a lengthy book, but it's also a dense book, is very, very tough for a modern audience. The second one, the more easy breezy, fun horror novel, is also going to be a hard sell because maybe people, instead of reading these cheesy horror novels or these just fun horror novels anymore, are having a better time on TikTok, having a better time on Instagram. Maybe they're on YouTube. I mean, this is on YouTube right now. And in this way, there's just not as much of a point. it doesn't really have a market anymore. The market has dried up. But I would like to believe that there are people like me. There are those who maybe already know they love these old horror books, or the feel of this just, it is a fun book to read. That's what I'm getting into. And I think there's another category too, who don't know that they like these books, that don't know that reading can be fun, that it can be entertaining, that it can be light at a lot of times, and it's almost like watching a movie, but you're reading. And this now brings us to the fifth and final point. I believe that a lot of horror readers, or just paperback readers in general, are individuals who don't mind exploring the darker sides of life reality. And yet in the literary market, the things that seem to have taken over the past 2 decades, I would say, more than anything, have been either young adult books, romance books, or these pop literary fiction type books. And certainly these books have their place in the market and they deserve to be here. By all means, good for them. But from the majority of horror readers and even horror fanatics who love horror movies, there's always just a little more grit and a little more dark depth, I would say, to them, where they want to explore these things and they want a deeper connection. And even though I was talking earlier about pulpy, fun horror books, I think what those bring in value is that they don't give you, again, a mainstream narrative. Everybody's not going to survive at the end, probably. There may be topics that are broached that could be uncomfortable, but there are also topics that are spoken and brought up in a way that they don't get flagged or they can go under the radar in a sense. So let's take, for example, a book I recently read was The Howling, and I really enjoyed the book. It was short, it was concise, it was fun to read, and no, it was not the most in-depth book. But if you consider what's being said in the allegory, I guess, or the deeper messages of werewolves in general, that you transform into something more animalistic, that your animal nature, your ego takes over, or your id takes over, and it's just, you are at its mercy, you are at its control. But in this book, The Howling, for this town that the 2 main characters move to in general, there's also messages of being a misfit, being the type of person that is forced to conform, forced to turn into a werewolf, or you are seen as prey for other people so that they can just eat you one day. And so there are a lot of these things that can be explored without maybe directly calling out certain cultures, societies, you name it. I'm not going to go into depth with it right now, but I think you get what I mean. And so if you're like me, when you go into a place like a Barnes & Nobles or some other really popular bookstore, and you look at the books on the shelf in perhaps the horror section where you normally like to go, and yet you just see all the same books that have been there for 30, 40 years. I won't name names, even though I've already done that earlier. Or you see books that just do not feel as if they are going to give you that true connection that you're looking for, or that aren't going to plunge to those depths, then it can feel like you don't belong in this scene anymore. You don't belong in the writing scene. You don't belong in the reading scene. It's not for you. So there's no wonder people are turned away, given all of these little barriers. Can you not see now why I call this podcast The Writer versus the Audience? Because it really is the biggest and most challenging thing now, is to bridge that disconnect, bridge that mistrust, and also bridge those connective needs that are there, because there's a lot of them. And with that, I think it's time to wrap up the podcast. I know I didn't get to go in depth to every single point that I wanted to, and I believe that there's more that is left to be said, But that's all right, because that's what podcasts are usually about, to keep expanding on ideas and looking into different things too. But one last thing I'll say is this. I don't think reading will ever die, and I think there will always be an audience of readers who are ready to hop into a new adventure, pick up a new book, and even try out perhaps a new author. However, at the core of all of this, I believe there is a desire to connect. The writer to connect with the reader to connect with the writer. And I believe that there are more barriers, and I do believe that that gap between them is a lot wider now. However, I also do think that there are many other ways and different channels compared to the past for the writer to connect with their readers, and vice versa. It's just the layout has changed, and I wanted to bring some of this up and explore it with you. I'm hopeful that if you gain something from this, you'll click like, and if you have any thoughts or ideas you'd like to share, that you'll do so in the comments. And even more, if you're keen to know what's going to happen in the next episode, that you'll subscribe. That's up to you. Either way, I'll be here next time, and until then, take care.